The Velithari Dominion had ruled the stars for 12,000 years. They had conquered 93 different species across the galaxy. They had destroyed civilizations that refused to bow. They had built an empire so vast that their ships blocked out the light of 1,000 suns. In all that time, no species had ever said no to them. Admiral Zethkorin stood on the bridge of his massive flagship. The ship was called the Eternal Subjugation, and it had brought death to 100 worlds. Round him, his crew worked in silence. They had done this many times before. Find a new species, demand surrender, crush any resistance. Move on to the next conquest. On the main view screen, a small blue planet rotated slowly in the darkness of space. Earth, the humans called it home. Zethkorin had studied the reports about this species. They were young, barely a few thousand years into their civilization. Their technology was primitive. They had only recently learned to leave their own planet. They should have been easy prey. 7 days ago, Zethkorin had sent the standard message: surrender your world, give us your resources, accept your place as servants of the Dominion, resist and we will burn your cities to ash. The humans had asked for time to consider. Zethkorin had given them 7 rotations. It was more than most species received. Now, on the 6th day, the human response finally arrived. The view screen flickered. A human female appeared. She wore a gray uniform with symbols that Zethkorin did not recognize. Her hair was dark, pulled back from her face. Her eyes were steady and calm. Behind her, Zethkorin could see colorful pieces of cloth hanging on poles. Flags, the reports called them. There were hundreds of them. I am Commander Lisa Morgan, the human said. I speak for the United Earth Defense Council. I speak for every nation on our planet. Speak for 8 billion human beings. Zethkorin leaned back in his command chair. He had heard many surrender speeches before. Some species begged. Some tried to negotiate. Some wept. He wondered which approach this human would take. We have received your demands, Lisa continued. We have discussed them. Every government on Earth has voted. The decision was unanimous. She paused. Something changed in her eyes. Zethkorin had seen many emotions in the eyes of conquered species. Fear, despair, hopelessness. But what he saw in this human's eyes was none of those things. It was something far more dangerous. Our answer is no. Silence fell across the bridge. Zethkorin's 4 eyes blinked in surprise. His tactical officer turned to stare at the screen. No one moved. We don't know much about you, Lisa said. We don't know how many worlds you've taken. We don't know how many species serve you. But we know exactly who we are. Your humanity. We have spent 10,000 years fighting each other. We have burned our own cities. We have killed millions of our own kind over land, over ideas, over pride. We have invented weapons that could destroy our entire world. Her voice grew harder. We have done terrible things to each other, wars that lasted decades. Weapons that poisoned the earth for generations. Hatred that passed from parent to child for centuries. We are not proud of this history, but it has made us something that you have never faced before. She took a step closer to the recording device. We are not a species that learned to fight out of necessity. We are a species that made war into an art form. We perfected killing long before we knew other life existed in the universe. Every human on this planet knows how to hate. Every human knows how to fight. Every human knows how to die for something they believe in. Zethkorin felt something cold move through his body. He told himself it was not fear. The Velithari did not feel fear. They were conquerors. They were masters of the galaxy. You have given us a gift, Lisa said, and now she was smiling. But there was no warmth in that smile. No joy. It was the smile of a predator. For 3 generations we have been at peace. We have worked together. We have put aside our differences. We never forgot how to fight. We just didn't have anyone worth fighting. She spread her arms wide, gesturing at the flags behind her. Until now. You have united humanity in a way we never managed ourselves. Every nation, every people. Every human being on Earth is now pointed at one target. You. Smile faded. Her face became stone. You want our world? Come and take it. You want our resources? Fight us for every grain of sand. You want us to kneel? You will have to break every bone in our bodies first. And even then, We will spit in your faces with our dying breath. She leaned forward until her face filled the screen. You chose war with humanity. Enjoy surviving. The transmission ended. The screen went dark. For a long moment, no one on the bridge spoke. Then Zethkaron began to laugh. It started as a small sound, then grew until it echoed off the walls. His crew looked at him with confusion. Bold words, Zethkaron said, wiping moisture from his eyes. Very bold words from a primitive species. They have spirit, I will give them that. It will make their defeat all the more satisfying. He stood from his command chair and looked around at his crew. They think they know war. They think their petty conflicts have prepared them for what is coming. They're children playing with toys, pointed at the view screen at the small blue world hanging in space. We have conquered species with technology 1,000 years more advanced than theirs. We have crushed civilizations that made these humans look like insects. They are nothing. His tactical officer stepped forward. Admiral, what are your orders? Zethkaron smiled. It was not a pleasant expression. Begin the invasion. Send every dropship we have. I want boots on the ground within 1 rotation. Show these humans what real war looks like. The crew moved to obey. Across the Velethari fleet, thousands of soldiers prepared for battle, dropships loaded with weapons and troops. Pilots ran final checks on their fighters. Officers reviewed their targets. The machinery of conquest began to turn. Admiral Zethkaron watched it all with satisfaction. He had done this many times before. He knew exactly how it would end. The humans would fight for a few days, perhaps a few weeks. Then they would realize they could not win. Then they would beg for the surrender terms they had rejected. They always did. He did not know that in 6 months, he would be dead. He did not know that his flagship would be torn apart by weapons the humans had not even invented yet. He did not know that his name would become a warning throughout the Dominion. A reminder of what happened when you underestimated a species. He did not know that he had. Just made the worst mistake in the history of his empire, but he would learn. They would all learn. The first Velethari dropships came down like metal rain. They fell through Earth's atmosphere in waves, their heat shields glowing red against the morning sky. Hundreds of them. Thousands. They targeted the largest cities on every continent. New York, London, Tokyo, Sydney. They expected to find chaos. They expected to find terror. They expected the primitive humans to run and hide like frightened animals. They found something very different. Major. Daniel Hayes watched the alien ships descend through his binoculars. He stood on the roof of a 40-story building in downtown Chicago. The wind was cold, but he did not feel it. He was too focused on counting the enemy. Beside him, Sergeant Maria Santos spoke quietly into her radio, coordinating with units spread across the city. 50 transports coming down in Grant Park, Daniel said. Maybe more. Looks like 2,000 soldiers, maybe 3. Maria looked up from her radio and smiled. It was not a nice smile. Perfect. They're landing exactly where we wanted them. For 3 months, Daniel had been preparing Chicago for this moment. The military had studied every piece of information they could find about the Velethari. They had analyzed the enemy's tactics from recordings of past invasions shared by freed alien prisoners. They had learned how the Dominion conquered worlds. The Velethari believed in overwhelming force. They landed in massive numbers, crushed any resistance, and moved on. It was simple, was efficient. It had worked for 12,000 years. But the Velethari had never fought humans before. The alien transports touched down in Grant Park with mechanical precision. Their doors opened, and soldiers poured out in perfect formation. The Velethari were tall, with gray skin and 4 eyes. They wore armor that shimmered like crystal. They carried rifles that glowed with blue energy. They moved like a machine, every soldier in exact position. They marched forward toward the city. Confident in their superiority, then the ground exploded beneath their feet. Daniel had spent weeks turning Chicago into a death trap. Every street was mined. Every building held snipers. Every subway tunnel was rigged with explosives. The city itself had become a weapon. The first explosion killed 30 Velethari soldiers instantly. Before the survivors could react, rifle fire erupted from windows on every side. Human soldiers, hidden in buildings that had looked empty, opened fire with everything they had. The Velethari formation shattered. Soldiers scattered for cover, but there was no cover. More explosions tore through their ranks. Snipers picked off officers from positions 800 meters away. Mortar rounds fell like deadly rain. A Velithari commander screamed orders into his communicator, trying to restore order, called for air support, but the human defense systems shot down every fighter that tried to approach. He called for reinforcements, but the drop zones were all under attack. Called for retreat, but there was nowhere to retreat to. He died with a human bullet in his brain, still screaming orders that no one could follow. Private Katie Brennan crouched behind a pile of rubble, her rifle pressed against her shoulder. She had been fighting for 6 hours. Her uniform was torn. Her face was covered in dust and blood. Her left arm hung useless at her side, hit by a plasma bolt that had burned through flesh and bone. Any Velithari soldier would have collapsed from that wound. Their nervous systems could not handle such pain. They would have been unable to function. Katie was not Velithari. She braced her rifle against the rubble, steadied it with her one good arm, and kept shooting. Every shot found a target. She had been hunting since she was 12 years old. She had been shooting since she was 8. Pain was just a feeling. Feelings could be ignored. Corporal Sam Rivera shouted from behind a burned-out car, "You need medical attention." Later, Katie replied, dropping another alien with a shot through its helmet. "After we win?" Sam stared at her for a moment. Then he shook his head and kept fighting. The scene repeated itself across the city. Across the world, the Velithari had expected humans to break when they saw their superior technology. Instead, the humans adapted. They learned. They found weaknesses in the alien armor. They discovered that the Velithari did not handle pain well. They realized that the enemy soldiers were trained for open battle, not urban warfare. And humans had been perfecting urban warfare for centuries. In London, resistance fighters ambushed an entire Velithari column in the underground tunnels. The aliens had thermal sensors that could detect humans through walls. So the fighters lit fires throughout the tunnels, filling the air with heat that blinded the sensors. Then they attacked with knives and clubs in bare hands in Tokyo. A 16-year-old girl named Yuki drove a truck loaded with explosives into a Velithari command post. She had volunteered for the mission. Her parents had already been killed in the initial bombardment. She died with a smile on her face, knowing she had taken 50 of the enemy with her in Sydney. An 8-year-old retired soldier named George led a group of civilians in an attack on an alien supply depot. They had no military training. They had hunting rifles and kitchen knives and garden tools. They won anyway. The Velithari had never faced anything like this. Every species they had conquered before had fought with their heads. They calculated odds. They measured costs and benefits. When the math said they could not win, they surrendered. Humans did not fight with their heads. Humans fought with their hearts, and hearts did not understand mathematics. On the bridge of the eternal subjugation, Admiral Zethkorn watched the battle reports with growing disbelief. His forces were dying. Not just dying, being slaughtered. In Chicago alone, he had lost 500 soldiers in the first hour. His commanders were calling for orbital bombardment, begging him to burn the cities from space. But Zethkorn hesitated. The Dominion wanted Earth's resources. They wanted human slaves. You could not enslave ashes. What are they doing? He demanded, watching footage of a human soldier fighting with one arm missing. Why won't they stop? Why won't they fall? His medical officer studied the data with all 4 eyes. Sir, human physiology is ... unusual. They produce chemicals in their brains during stress, adrenaline, endorphins. These chemicals suppress pain and increase aggression. They can continue fighting with wounds that would incapacitate any Velithari soldier. For how long? Until they die, Admiral? Only until they die. The Battle of Chicago lasted 16 days. When it ended, not a single Velithari soldier within the city was still alive. Human casualties were high, terrible, but the survivors stood among the rubble of their city and cheered. They had won. Against impossible odds, against superior technology, against an empire that had never known defeat, they had won, and this was only the beginning. Major Daniel Hayes. stood on the same rooftop where he had watched the invasion begin. The building was damaged now, missing half its windows, scorched by plasma fire, but it was still standing. Just like humanity, Maria Santos climbed up beside him, her arm in a sling. She looked out at the burning remains of the Velithari army. "You think they learned their lesson?" she asked. Daniel shook his head slowly. "No, they'll send more. They'll bomb us from orbit. They'll try everything they can think of. We'll keep fighting." "Yes." Daniel turned to look at her. His eyes were hard, but there was something burning behind them. Hope, or maybe just stubborn human determination. "We'll keep fighting until every single one of them is dead or gone. However long it takes, whatever it costs." Maria nodded. She understood. They all understood. This was humanity's war now, and humanity did not lose wars. 6 months after the invasion began, Admiral Zethkoron stopped sleeping. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the faces of the dead. Not human faces. Velithari faces. His soldiers, his officers, his friends. Thousands of them lost on that cursed blue planet below. He had started this campaign with 200,000 troops. He had less than half that number now. The humans should have surrendered by now. Every other species would have surrendered. The Velithari had burned 12 of their largest cities from orbit. They had killed millions. They had shown the humans what real power looked like. The humans had responded by fighting harder. Zethkoron sat in his command chair, staring at the latest reports. They made no sense. Human casualties were far higher than Velithari losses. Their cities were in ruins. Their infrastructure was destroyed. By every measure, by every calculation, they were losing. But they did not act like they were losing. "Sir," his tactical officer said quietly, "we've lost contact with another ground force. Battalion 12. They were operating in the region the humans call France." "How many?" 800 soldiers, sir. Gone. No survivors." Zethkoron's hands tightened on the arms of his chair. That was the 37th unit he had lost to the human resistance. The 37th group of soldiers who had simply vanished, swallowed by this nightmare world. "There's more, Admiral." The tactical officer's voice shook slightly. "The humans have developed countermeasures for our shield technology. They're building weapons from salvaged equipment. And, sir, they've started attacking our ships." Zethkoron looked up sharply. "What, boarding actions, Admiral?" "Human strike teams are using chemical rockets to reach low orbit. They're cutting through our hull plating with plasma torches built from our own weapons. That's suicide. The exposure to vacuum alone would kill them before they reach the hull." "Yes, sir." "They know that. They're doing it anyway." Lieutenant Commander Jack Morris floated through the hole his team had cut in the Velithari cruiser's outer hull. His spacesuit was already damaged, leaking precious oxygen into the void. The cold of space was seeping through the tears, turning his fingers numb. He had maybe 3 minutes of air left. Maybe less. Behind him, 11 other humans pulled themselves through the breach. None of them expected to survive. They had all volunteered anyway. 90 seconds to the reactor, Jack said through his helmet radio. His voice was calm, almost peaceful. "Stay together. Move fast. Remember why we're here." They were here because the Velithari cruiser above them had spent the last week bombing cities across South America. They were here because 2 million people had died under its guns. They were here because someone had to make the enemy pay, and humans always made their enemies pay. The team moved through the ship's corridors, fighting every step of the way. Velithari soldiers rushed to stop them, firing plasma rifles in the tight spaces. The humans fired back with captured weapons and homemade explosives. Bodies fell on both sides. Jack took a plasma bolt to his shoulder. The heat burned through his suit, melting flesh. He kept moving. A Velithari soldier lunged at him with a blade. Jack caught the alien's arm, broke it, and shoved the soldier into a wall. He kept moving. His oxygen gauge read 0. He was breathing the last air in his lungs now. His vision was starting to blur at the edges. His body was shutting down. He kept moving. The reactor room door was sealed. Jack pressed his last explosive charge against it and stepped back. The explosion tore the door apart. Jack stumbled through the smoking gap, his team behind him. The Velithari reactor was a beautiful thing. A sphere of contained energy, humming with power. Enough power to run a city? Or to destroy a ship? Jack placed his charges carefully. His hands were shaking now. His lungs were screaming for air. His heart was stuttering in his chest. Charges set, he whispered into his radio. Tell my wife. Tell her I love her. Tell her I'm sorry. He armed the timer. 10 seconds. The last thing Jack Morris saw was the flash of the explosion. The last thing he felt was the reactor's energy tearing the ship apart. The last thing he thought was a simple prayer that he had done enough. The cruiser fell from orbit in 3 burning pieces. It lit up the night sky over Brazil like a new sun. On the ground, humans who had been fighting an endless battle looked up and cheered. One enemy ship down. They had only done the impossible. Across Earth, the news spread like wildfire. A human team had destroyed a Velithari warship. 12 people against a vessel carrying 2,000. It should have been impossible. It should have been hopeless. Humans did not believe in hopeless. Within days, volunteers lined up at every military base. They wanted to join the next boarding team. They wanted to take the fight to the enemy. They wanted to make the Velith. Ari afraid. Admiral Zethkarin received the news of his cruiser's destruction in silence. His staff waited for him to speak, to give orders, to do something. He sat motionless for a long time. They killed themselves, he finally said. His voice was barely a whisper. They knew they would die, and they attacked anyway. What kind of species does that? What kind of creature chooses certain death? No one had an answer. The Velithari understood many things. They understood power. They understood conquest. They understood the mathematics of war. But they did not understand sacrifice. They did not understand the human willingness to die for something greater than themselves. It terrified them. In the following weeks, more human strike teams launched more attacks. Not all of them succeeded. Many died before reaching their targets. But enough succeeded to matter. Ship after ship fell from the sky. The Velithari fleet, which had seemed so invincible, began to bleed. Private Katie Brennan, her arm now replaced with a mechanical prosthetic, led a resistance cell in occupied Germany. She had recovered from her wounds in Chicago and immediately returned to fighting. Her team specialized in ambushes, hitting Velithari patrols, and disappearing before reinforcements could arrive. The aliens had started calling her the Ghost. They told stories about her to frighten new soldiers. Some said she was a demon. Some said she could not be killed. Some said she appeared from nowhere, struck without mercy, and vanished like smoke. Katie heard these stories and smiled. Let them be afraid. Let them jump at shadows. Let them learn what it felt like to be hunted. Sergeant Maria Santos had been promoted to captain. She commanded the defense of Chicago's ruins, leading teams of survivors who refused to abandon their city. The Velithari had bombed it 3 times from orbit. Each time the humans dug themselves out of the rubble and kept fighting. Why won't you leave? A captured Velithari officer asked her once. There's nothing left here, just ruins and death. Maria had looked at the alien for a long moment. This is our home, she said. You don't abandon your home. You don't surrender your home. You fight for it until there's nothing left to fight with, and then you fight some more. The officer did not understand. He could not understand. The Velithari had conquered 93 species, but they had never met one like humanity. They had never met a species that loved their world so much they would burn themselves to protect it. They were learning now the hard way, on the bridge of the eternal subjugation. Admiral Zethkarin made a decision. Ground invasion had failed. Orbital bombardment had failed. Superior technology had failed. Everything he knew about conquest had failed, but the Dominion had other weapons. Older weapons, weapons that had never failed. Send a message to the homeworld, he ordered. Tell them we need the Genesis fleet. His officers went pale. The Genesis fleet was the Dominion's final solution. It did not conquer worlds. It sterilized them. It turned living planets into dead rocks, suitable only for mining. Sir, one officer dared to speak. The High Council ordered us to take Earth intact. The Genesis fleet would destroy everything. I know. Zethkorin's voice was empty, hollow. But if we cannot have this world, then neither can they. Send the message. The message went out across the stars, and humanity had no idea that their greatest challenge was still coming. 1 year after the invasion began, humanity learned about the Genesis fleet. The information came from a captured Velathari officer, broken after weeks of interrogation. He had laughed when he told them, a horrible sound filled with despair and dark satisfaction. Doesn't matter what you do, he had said. It doesn't matter how many of us you kill. The Genesis fleet is coming. 12 ships, each one carrying enough firepower to crack a planet in half. They will sterilize your world. Every human, every animal, every plant. Everything will burn. You cannot stop it. No one can stop it. The news spread through human command channels within hours. For a brief moment, despair touched even the strongest hearts. They had fought so hard. They had sacrificed so much. And now extinction was coming. There was nothing they could do. The moment passed. Admiral Patricia Cole stood before the United Earth Defense Council. Her gray hair pulled back tight, her uniform spotless despite a year of constant war. She had earned her rank in blood. Leading the assault that captured the Velathari command base on the moon, the enemy called her the Butcher of Luna. She called herself a survivor. The Genesis fleet will arrive in approximately 6 months, she said. We cannot fight them from the ground. Our planetary defenses might destroy 1 or 2 ships, but 12? No. If we stay here, if we wait for them, we die. The council members looked at each other. Some were military, some were scientists, some were politicians who had survived the destruction of their governments. All of them looked exhausted. All of them looked afraid. What do you suggest, Admiral? Asked General Victor Park, the ranking military commander of the Asian Coalition forces. Patricia smiled. It was a thin smile, hard as steel. We don't wait for them. We go to them. She pressed a button, and a holographic display appeared above the table. It showed a ship unlike anything Earth had ever built. It was massive, ugly, and brutal, a combination of human engineering and captured Velathari technology. For the past 8 months, we have been building this in secret. We call her the Spite. Patricia's voice carried a note of fierce pride. She's the first of her kind. An interstellar warship. Human-designed, human-built, powered by Velathari technology we've learned to use. 1 ship against 12? General Park shook his head. That's not a battle. That's suicide. 1 ship would be suicide. We have 37. The council went silent. 37 ships, Patricia continued. Built in shipyards across the world, hidden underground and underwater. Assembled by crews who knew they might never see their work finished. 37 ships, crewed by volunteers who know they might never come home. 37 ships, armed with weapons that combine their plasma technology with our nuclear warheads. She looked around the table, meeting every pair of eyes. The Velathari taught us how to reach the stars. We intend to teach them that was a mistake. 3 months later, the human fleet launched. Captain Katie Brennan stood on the bridge of the Fury. It's the 9th ship in the formation. Her mechanical arm hummed softly as she gripped the railing. She had traded her rifle for a captain's chair. But she was still the same person who had fought through Chicago with 1 arm destroyed. Still the same ghost who had haunted the occupation forces. All systems green, her executive officer reported. Jump drive is ready. He nodded. Around her, 50 crew members worked at their stations. Engineers, gunners, pilots, all of them volunteers. All of them ready to die. She thought about the Velathari officer, who had laughed about the Genesis fleet. He had not been laughing when she finished with him. He had been crying, begging, unable to understand how these primitive creatures kept fighting, kept hurting, kept refusing to break. Now they would do more than refuse to break. They would break the enemy instead. All ships report ready. Admiral Cole's voice came through the fleet communication channel. Jump in 30 seconds. Remember your training. Remember your targets. Remember why we're here. Katie closed her eyes for a moment. She remembered Chicago. She remembered the pain of the plasma bolt that had taken her arm. She remembered the faces of everyone who had died. Remember what they did to us? Admiral Cole continued. Remember our cities burning. Remember our people dying? Remember everything they took from us. Katie's eyes opened. They were cold and hard. Now let's take it back. All ships, jump. The human fleet vanished from Earth's orbit in a flash of light. They reappeared in deep space. Halfway between Earth and the approaching Genesis fleet, the Velithari ships were still days away, traveling at sublight speed. They had not expected anyone to come meet them. They had not expected anyone to be this insane. Admiral Zethkorin was aboard the lead Genesis ship, the World Ender. He had transferred his flag to this vessel when the fleet arrived, eager to witness humanity's extinction personally. When his sensors detected the human fleet, he did not believe it. That's impossible, he said, staring at the display. They don't have interstellar capability. They don't have warships. This must be an error. No error, Admiral, his tactical officer replied. 37 vessels, human design, approaching at attack speed. Zethkorin felt something cold settle in his chest. Not fear. The Velithari did not feel fear, but something close to it. Oh, put a channel, he ordered. I want to speak with their commander. Admiral Cole's face appeared on his view screen. She looked calm, almost peaceful. Behind her, the human bridge crew worked with quiet efficiency. Admiral Zethkorin, Patricia said. We meet at last. You're the one they call the Butcher of Luna. I prefer Admiral Cole, but I answer to either. She smiled slightly. I see you brought your planet killers. Planning to sterilize our world from a safe distance? It doesn't have to end this way, Zethkorin said. The words surprised him. He had not planned to say them. Surrender now. Accept Dominion rule. Your people can still live. They can serve. There is no shame in bowing to superior force. Patricia laughed. It was not a nice sound. You still don't understand, do you? After a year of fighting us, after losing half your army, after watching your soldiers die by the thousands, you still don't understand what are. At we are. She leaned forward, her eyes burning with something that made Zethkorina's skin crawl. We are humanity. We do not surrender. We do not bow. We do not serve. We fight until we win or until we die, and sometimes we keep fighting after that. You want our world? You'll have to go through us first. The channel closed. Zethkorin stared at the empty screen. Then he straightened in his chair and gave the order he had given so many times before. All ships, battle formation. Destroy them. The Battle of the Black Sun, as the humans would later call it, lasted 9 hours. It was the largest space battle in human history. It was the deadliest battle the Velithari had ever fought. The Genesis fleet had overwhelming firepower. Their ships were massive, their weapons devastating. They had fought 1,000 battles and never lost. But the humans had something the Velithari did not have. They had rage. They had hate. They had a burning need for revenge that no alien species could understand. The spite led the charge. Admiral Cole standing on her bridge as plasma fire lit up the darkness around her. 2 Genesis ships fell 2 coordinated nuclear strikes, their planet-killing weapons never getting a chance to fire. 3 more were disabled by kamikaze runs. Human pilots flying their damaged ships directly into enemy engines. The Fury fought like a wild animal. Captain Brennan drove her ship through the enemy formation, firing at anything that moved. When her main weapons were destroyed, she rammed a Genesis ship's bridge at full speed, killing the enemy commander before ejecting her crew in escape pods. Ship after ship fell. On both sides, human and Velithari dying together in the cold darkness of space, blood and fire and screaming metal. When it was over, Admiral Zethkorin was dead. His flagship was broken into 3 pieces, drifting through a field of debris. Of the 12 Genesis ships, only 2 remained. Both too damaged to continue fighting. Of the 37 human ships, 19 survived. Admiral Patricia Cole looked at the survivors. 19 ships. Half her fleet gone. Thousands of good people dead, but they had one. The Genesis fleet was destroyed. Earth was safe. And humanity had proven something important to the galaxy. They could be hurt. They could be killed. But they could not be conquered. Not now. Not ever. 5 years after the Velithari Dominion made first contact with humanity, the war ended. It did not end with a final battle or a dramatic last stand. It ended in a room on a space station orbiting Earth, with 2 exhausted leaders sitting across a table from each other. The room was plain with white walls and simple furniture. There were no flags, no symbols, no decorations. Just 2 people and the weight of millions of dead. Admiral Patricia Cole represented humanity. Her hair was completely gray now, her face lined with years of stress and grief. But her eyes were the same as they had always been. Sharp, unbroken, dangerous, high. Chancellor Thelmoran represented the Velithari Dominion. He was old for his species, his gray skin faded to almost white. He had taken power after the death of the previous council, swept into office by a population desperate for peace. He had never wanted this war. Now, he just wanted it to end. "Your terms are acceptable," Thelmoran said. His voice was quiet, almost a whisper. "We will withdraw all forces from human space. We will release all human prisoners. We will pay reparations for the damage we have caused." Patricia nodded slowly. She had fought for years to reach this moment. She had lost friends, colleagues, and nearly her own life. She should have felt triumphant. She should have felt proud. She just felt tired. "There are additional conditions," she said. "Your ships will not enter human space without permission. Any Velithari vessel that crosses into our territory will be considered hostile and destroyed. There will be no exceptions." "Agreed. You will share your technology with us. Engines, weapons, medical advances, everything your empire has developed over 12,000 years. We will learn it all." Thelmoran hesitated. That was a heavy demand. That knowledge represented millennia of Velithari advancement. Giving it to humanity would make them equals in a generation. But he had no choice. The Dominion was falling apart. Species they had conquered for thousands of years were rising up, inspired by humanity's impossible victory. The empire was crumbling. They needed peace at any price. "Greed," he said again. Patricia leaned back in her chair. The negotiations were essentially over. The formal documents would take weeks to finalize, but the war was done. Humanity had won. She waited for the satisfaction to come. It did not. "May I ask you something, Admiral?" Thelmoran said. "Go ahead." The old Velithari looked at her with all 4 eyes. Patricia had learned to read alien expressions over the years. She saw confusion in his face. She saw something that might have been respect. And underneath it all, she saw fear. "Why did you fight?" he asked. "When we first came, we offered you a choice. Surrender and live as servants, or resist and die. Every other species chose survival. They submitted. They accepted their place in the Dominion. They lived." He spread his thin hands in a gesture of helplessness. "You chose death. You chose war against an enemy you could not possibly defeat. Your technology was primitive. Your numbers were smaller. By every measure, you should have lost. Why did you fight when surrender would have saved millions of your people?" Patricia was silent for a long moment. She thought about all the people who had died. About Chicago and London and Tokyo. About the ships burning in space. About friends who had given their lives so others could live. She thought about Jack Morris, flying his damaged ship into a Velithari reactor. About Katie Brennan, fighting with one arm destroyed, refusing to stop. About Daniel Hayes, who had held Chicago for 16 days and died defending it a year later. About Maria Santos, still walked with a limp from wounds that never fully healed. She thought about 8 billion humans who had looked at an impossible enemy and said no, because we're human. She said finally, "Because surrender isn't living. It's just not dying. There's a difference." Thelmoran tilted his head, not understanding. Your other conquests, Patricia continued. They calculated the odds. They measured the cost of resistance against the cost of submission. They made the logical choice. They survived. She leaned forward, her eyes holding his. I don't think like that. We never have. We don't ask whether we can win. We ask whether we're willing to lose. And we decided we would rather die free than live as slaves. All of us. Every human on Earth made that choice, but millions did die. Yes, and every one of them died fighting. Every one of them died free. Every one of them died human. Trisha's voice was soft, but there was steel underneath it. You could have killed all of us. You could have burned our planet to ash. But you never could have conquered us. Because you can't conquer a people who refuse to be conquered. Thelmoran was quiet for a long time. When he spoke again, his voice was heavy with something like sorrow. We didn't understand, he said. We thought war was about power, about resources, about territory. We didn't realize that for you, it was about something else entirely. About your spirits? Your souls. Now you know, Patricia replied. And so does the rest of the galaxy. The treaty was signed 3 weeks later. The Velithari withdrew from human space. Prisoners were released. Reparations began to flow. The war was officially over. But the galaxy had changed forever. In the decades that followed, humanity spread across the stars. They built ships and colonies and outposts. They explored worlds that no human had ever seen. They met other species, other civilizations, other empires. Some of these species tried to oppose them. Some tried to conquer them. Some tried to exploit them. All of them learned the same lesson the Velithari had learned. Captain Katie Brennan, Admiral Brennan, led the defense against the Crocian hegemony when they tried to claim human colonies by force. The Crocian War lasted 8 months. When it ended, the hegemony no longer existed. General Maria Santos commanded human forces during the Liberation Wars. When humanity helped free species still enslaved by the crumbling Dominion, she became a hero to dozens of alien races, a symbol of hope and freedom. Patricia Cole retired after the treaty, but she was never forgotten. Schools were named after her. Statues were built in her honor. Children learned about the Battle of the Black Sun and the admiral who had refused to surrender. And across the galaxy, in the great libraries of 100 worlds, a new phrase entered the common language. It was a warning, a reminder, a promise that was spoken by Velithori officers to their children, by Crocian historians to their students, by countless species who had heard the stories of what happened when you threatened humanity. You chose war with humanity. Enjoy surviving. Some species thought it was just a saying, just words. They learned otherwise. A young Velithari diplomat once asked Patricia Cole, many years after the war, what advice she would give to any species thinking of attacking humanity. The old admiral smiled. It was a thin smile, cold and hard. Don't, she said simply. And if they do anyway? Patricia looked at the young alien with eyes that had seen too much death and had never looked away. Then they should make peace with their gods, because they're about to meet them. She died peacefully in her sleep at the age of 93, surrounded by family and friends. She was buried on Earth, in a small cemetery outside Chicago. Next to the men and women she had served with, her headstone was simple. Just her name, her dates, and 4 words, T,